Hello and welcome to episode 43 of Anne and Steve Talk Stuff, a podcast where an artist and an economist walk into the podcast and talk about strange things that make the world go round. Stephen Kinsella is Professor of Economics at UL, contributor to The Currency and general talker about things. And Blake that's me, is an artist, a theatre maker, musician with the Rabbit Light Orchestra, and co-presenter of the Limerick Lady podcast, also Limerick Post. I'm just getting those in there now, Stephen. I know I haven't done that before, but I thought let's get us introduced at the top. I hope that's okay.
Yeah, awesome. That's great.
You're lying down.
I am the horizontal economist. Yeah, I just managed to damage my back, and can't really stand up or sit down or lie down or whatever. Just in a bit of pain. So, I just gave a public lecture for 2 hours on the internet, and I had to stand up for all that, and I'm in bits. So I said, you know what, I'm just gonna lie down for this bit. So, you very nicely obliged me, Anne. So thank you very much.
Hey, you're going to take this lying down then?
I'm literally going to take this lying down. I literally am going to take this lying down.
Well, considering
no, I'm on the. I should be okay, but it's not great at the moment, to be honest.
Well, listen, considering all of the above, this might, just to let people know, it might be a slightly shorter episode, just because I don't want Stephen to be unnecessarily working in a lying down position. So
I'm not killing myself right now. I'm not going to lie. It's okay.
Well, listen, this is quite interesting. The fact that you are lying down, and possibly this might be an image, if you were a different person, that you would not be happy with this being shared with the world. Because what we're going to talk about today is with online teaching, with online learning, there is a phenomenon of whether or not the camera is on and off if you are learning. So not from the teacher point of view, but if you're a student accessing online learning, there is a phenomenon now of having your camera off. And this could be for a number of reasons. It could be that it improves your Wi-Fi signal. It could be that your surroundings just aren't really conducive. You might have you might be in a part of your house where people are coming and going. You might want to maintain your privacy. You might feel like being seen. There's a lot of things at play. But I put this question out into the ether, and I was very interested in talking to you about this, Stephen, because you are an educator, you are teaching people, and you're encountering this. So I just wanted to kind of put the cameras off issue to you as an educator.
Yeah. So one of the things that, so I guess a bit of context. So I would have taught upwards of like 1,000 students at this point from March of last year to literally 20 minutes ago, right? I've given probably 100 online seminars since COVID started. So I have a really good sense of this. And I think it's probably worth separating out like the first lecture from all the other ones. On the first lecture, everyone kind of brings the A game. They're all done, like the men are wearing shirts, the women are kind of a bit dressed up. The room is tidy, whatever, and that's grand. And then you do a thing where you kind of introduce yourself if it's small enough class. If there's like 30 or 40 students, they introduce themselves. That kind of So that's, let's just put that to one side and then just get into the normal. So it's week 3 of term as we're recording this right now on the 10th of February. It's like week 3. So the students are like they're used to this now as well. So I would find that the way I do it is I say, of course, anyone is free to keep their camera on or keep their camera off, but at the start we all say hello to each other, just as an etiquette thing. Just say hello. So people will kind of wave, and I always allow 5 minutes in the class at the start for people just to say hello to each other, just to replicate that thing of like what happens in a regular lecture where you walk in, you're having the chat before you walk in. Yeah. Just some kind of like small social things. Sorry. And then the other the other thing that I find really interesting is that, like, I'm looking into the bedrooms of hundreds of people. That's
Mm,
really what I'm doing, right?
mm,
And you're right now. You're looking into one of my bedrooms, right?
mhm.
So this is the spare room where there's a drum kit behind me. You know, there's a drum kit. It's not particularly tidied up. I deliberately didn't tidy it, um, because uh, I knew this was going out on YouTube, and this is what most rooms look like.
Mm.
There's stuff everywhere. It's not particularly, and it's not done up. Also, there happens to be a horizontal economist in the middle of the room, right? So not great. So anyway, the I think what's interesting is you're getting this like very private thing. So people, like, you can see people like their mums are bringing them in cups of tea
Mm.
and stuff, and like there is a significant privacy concern there. We've all seen the kind of like hilarious Zoom fails where, like, I think the best one by far is there's I think she's Italian. She's giving like this kind of Zoom speech, and this dude just wanders across behind her in his jocks, and
It's
then
wonderful.
realizes what's wrong, and then whacks off a wall.
His
Superb.
reaction
It's
is
absolutely superb. His
good.
reaction is like, and there's a moment where he just kind of stands there and goes, "Are they seeing me?" You know. And she's like, and she tries to keep it together, and yeah. So there is that privacy concern. The other thing is, and you mentioned it, is bandwidth. So there's a thing called the contention ratio, and we all basically feed off the same pipe, in terms of broadband. And if you don't have a really good broadband connection, that's not good for you. Other thing is, not everybody has high spec laptop.
Mm.
So educational inequality doesn't just mean inequality of access, it also means inequality of provision. Some of the students, for example, who live in less affluent areas of Limerick, where I teach, um, they might have to take two buses to get to university, right? Because there's no direct route. We haven't solved that yet. And if they don't have a car, it becomes much more difficult for them to get there. But a lot of them won't have laptops, right? They might dial in on their phones.
Mhm.
So if they're dialing in on their phones, then the signal is much worse, and all that kind of thing. Um, there, I think the so in addition to the kind of like etiquette and the class learning stuff,
Mm.
some of it is just about inequality, right?
Yeah.
Like, and if you deal with I don't know, the class I've got now has 248 students in it. Like, you're dealing with a reasonable cross section of humanity. Some people are having a brilliant days, some people are having bad days. So, most people are vertical, some are horizontal, and you know, you see all kinds of things. I Yeah. So for me, as an educator, I after that like initial hello is over, most people turn off their cameras. And what I'm doing is engaging in an act of trust with them, that they are going to they're like kind of engaged with what I'm doing.
Mm.
It's it's tricky because of course they could be doing sit-ups, they could be walking out of the room, they could be having a cup of tea, whatever. I don't know. I have no
Kind of
idea.
literally phoning it in.
They could literally be phoning it. That's okay. That is
Look,
okay. These are
I
adults.
I
They're making a
remember,
decision.
just thinking back, like I remember in college, going to lectures and being zoned out, or being a
Yeah.
bit hungover or tired. I've had this memory because obviously this is an issue for all secondary school students, primary school students. Um,
Mm.
I remember the phenomenon of opening your desk to get something and just leaving the desk up a little bit longer just to kind of hide from, maybe you have a bar or something that you're eating and you don't want to be caught, or you're making a face at someone else or something. And I kind of feel like this
Mm.
is like, if I was a student now in this scenario, I probably be like, oh my God, this is just like lifting my desk up, but I don't have to put it down again.
Yeah.
Um, I think
Exactly.
what's interesting about it, and I put a question out, as I said, on Twitter, and there was number of answers. Someone, Anna said, "I'm happy to turn my camera on, but no one else does, so I don't." Um, Conor Donovan said, "Doing a master's, I don't turn it on unless I'm presenting." and most lectures just involve slideshow or the lecturer sharing their screen. Um, from Sligo Economics, I don't know the name of this person, but they said they've taught several modules online. They've never turned on the camera, nor have the students. There's no need for me to see their faces, and it would probably use too much bandwidth. Danny O'Brien says it's on because I'm teaching, but I do try to get people to turn theirs on as well. And Stephen Casey said, my built-in webcam, kind of what you're saying, faded last semester. And I find myself in tutorials starting every comment now with, sorry, my camera isn't working. But so there is that kind of acknowledgement. But I suppose what I find kind of curious about this, and I suppose as a person who I I do a lot of live like workshop. A lot of the work I do is like you is for people to be in rooms together and to connect. Um, and Jenny, my wife, who I often refer to in this, is currently doing a master's, and she was telling me recently she was in a situation where they were all asked to put their cameras on, and she was the
Mhm.
only person who did, and then she was put into a breakout room with three people, and they still didn't put their cameras on, and one of them didn't even speak,
Oh,
and this I'm curious about this because obviously the privacy thing 100% are like somebody was saying there, look, there's no need. I'm watching a lecturer share their slides, but I suppose when this
yeah.
comes down to the interactive level of education, or what you're doing is, let's say hello at the beginning, let's connect, um
Mm.
or or if there is literal breakout rooms with peer learning where we need to discuss, we need to work together on something. And like she said, she's like being going, hello, hello. And people are just typing, oh, I'm looking something up. Like I'm fine. I just said, I need to talk to Stephen about this week, or thoughts on it. Cause I'm getting a bit, obviously, dystopia terrors that we're all going to stop being able to actually interact with each other or something.
Yeah, I mean, first off, fair play to Jenny for going back and doing that. That's awesome, right?
Mm,
It's awesome. Ireland's rate of lifelong learning is one of the lowest in the OECD.
really?
So we're pretty crap at it, to be honest. A lot of it is just we just don't have the systems, and it's not part of the culture in work. A lot of people can't go back and also pay bills at the same time. So it's something that Simon Harris is looking at quite carefully. But like, to be honest, it's something it'll take us 10 years to fix it if we really put our shoulder to the wheel, and there's not a lot of evidence that that's happening just yet. But anyway, it's really good that that's happening.
Hmm.
The breakout room thing. So I started trying to do the breakout room thing, thinking this
Hmm.
will be great for interactivity. It was the exact opposite. So with an MBA class last year, I had a go at it, and I all came back going, "Can we please just not?" Um, I think because there's no socially accepted way of doing it,
Right.
right? So nobody knows how to do it, so everyone's kind of going the best way they know. Some people, aren't comfortable. Like, like I can remember one student particularly going, like, I'm not super into seeing my own face. I don't want to look at my own face. And I thought that was a very revealing thing, and some of it. So I just actually dropped it. I don't use those breakout room things anymore. Now it depends on the class, of course. Every educator is free to choose how they interact with their students. I just feel like it's we don't yet know how to do it. The students themselves really didn't want to,
Mm,
you know. Um, but it raises it's more that's a methodological kind of pedagogical question.
mm,
Do you choose? That's more like, do you choose red pencils or green pencils? The larger question, which is really important, is anyone learning anything?
mm,
Like, is anyone actually learning anything? Um, we know for a fact that a lecture where some person stands up and goes blah 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 is probably about 18 to 25% effective after 2 or 3 hours. In terms of, like, I tell you the 2 plus 2 equals 4, you're able to recall that fact 2 to 3 hours later. About a quarter, slightly less than a quarter of people can do that. After about a week, it's maybe 10%, and after 2 months or 3 months, it's like 5%. The only way to increase that percentage is something called spaced repetition learning, which we call revising or cramming, shove it into your head.
yeah.
And if you just it's there's a thing called the Anki method, ANKI, which is really really good, proven to increase recall. Anyway, the question is, like, so we know the lecture method is like imperfect, and we know
Mm,
that it doesn't really work that well. We know that like somebody asked me like, how do you feel about teaching? I've had to really think about it. I don't know that I've ever taught anyone anything. Like I taught my child how to ride a bike, because I stood beside him and went, "This is how you ride the bike."
Mm.
And I've taught PhD students how to run a particular regression or do a computer program or whatever. But a lot of the time, what I'm doing as a lecturer is I'm going, "There's a big thing over here. It's called econometrics,
Mm.
right?" And I'm telling them, "You go over there now and you figure that out."
Yeah.
And then we're going to have things called problem sets where I'm going to assess how much you learned on your own. So I don't know if I've ever actually formally taught that many people. I would say probably in the low 20s or 30s,
Okay.
whereas over my like lecturing career, I've been lecturing since I was 21. I've done 2 courses a semester, sometimes 3, call it 2 on average. One of them has had 500 students in it every year for 15 years. So if you imagine, call it 750 students a semester, 1,500 a year, 20,000 students, right?
Okay.
Let's say, I mean, I don't know how many of those I've ever taught,
Okay.
to be perfectly honest, you know? So there's that thing about learning. Why is learning happening?
Mm.
Because it doesn't actually matter if I'm in a concert hall in UL, or if I'm in my spare room going yap 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 into my laptop, or if they're in my office and I'm like doing this one-to-one tutorial stuff, which would
Mm.
actually be my preferred mode of teaching, to be perfectly honest. If I
Yeah.
could do that, um, I'm not sure if any learning is happening, and I know because we've had to come up with a whole bunch of new assessments
Mm.
that we we will struggle to assess their learning, because of course I can't just go, everyone sit in a room for 2 hours with a bit of paper and write some shit down. Can't
Mm.
do that. You just
Yeah.
can't, like, because we'd give everyone COVID, right? We can't do it.
Yeah.
So also I can't stand up right now, so not brilliant. So
Yeah.
yeah, I I think some of the assessment methods that I'm using right now, like I'm using an online program called Data Camp,
Mm.
where they will do some assessments on it, because now I'm lucky I'm teaching something called machine learning for
Yeah.
economics, which is it's computers, and
Yes.
so they can work with the computers, and that'll be grand. Now,
Yeah.
are they doing it all sat around in an online WhatsApp group, going, "Somebody tell me the answer and I'll just type it in"? They could be. I don't know.
Yeah.
I there that there's an honor system here. They're adults. I trust that they will do the best for themselves,
Mm.
but I don't know. And I
I
have no
guess
one to check, so I have to just trust them.
well, there's that. I like. I also realize what is lost. I mean, like distance learning is not a new thing. It used to be done by post and things like that. Do you know what I mean? Like
By
it's
plane.
it's not a yeah. It's not a new phenomenon. I suppose the way it's been done now is better in many ways, better than post. But like just the idea of walking into a lecture hall, meeting someone, chatting about maybe the thing you're going to be doing that day, or the lecture ends and you talk about it a bit, or you double check with each other in physically, physically in person. Like there are all these
Yeah,
other elements outside of just showing up to a lecture. There's the coffee afterwards. There's the just that as you said, that extra kind of almost backing up of what has been sent your way, or even someone going, well, I heard this, well, I heard that. Like that's all gone. And especially if you are put into a breakout room with somebody, for example, and you're meant to discuss something, or you're given 10 minutes, look, just discuss this thing and come back and report to us all, and cameras
mm,
are off or microphones are off. um it's just all that stuff is just gone. All that
yeah,
ancillary extra aspect of being a student and a learner is
yeah,
just gone. I do
yeah,
one of the best discoveries. I just a slight aside before I come back to you on that. One of the best discoveries I made, and I am operating it right now, which might be quite obvious if you're watching this on YouTube. I've turned off self view, so all I can see is you, because that's what it would be if I was in a room with you. I would only be looking at you. I would not be looking at myself, and you might be looking
how
at
do you do that?
the top right corner. there's three dots next to mute. There's three dots. You click on that, and about half five down, it says hide self view, and it just means you can. It's just it's made for me. It's made Zoom meetings. It's made everything way less tiring. Because I don't want to. That student's right. I don't want to look at myself. I never look at myself when in the real world when I'm talking to someone. I'm looking at the person. But all that aside, yeah, so it's probably quite obvious because the heck of me, I'm not really caring what I look like on this video. But I'm wearing my old podcast fleecy because, as I said, this corner of my house is quite cold, but it works acoustically. Um, just the idea that all those ancillary aspects of learning, like, what are your thoughts as an educator around that, or are you just throwing your hands to heaven, going, "Well, I don't know."
Um, okay, so we're not doing distance education. Distance education is a very particular skill. It takes about 2 years to build a successful distance education module,
Okay.
and we've had like a couple of weeks to do most of this. So we're not doing that. But also, the people who sign up to distance education are very different in terms of their profile, typically. And the kinds of degrees that they do are very different. They're quite technical often. What we're doing is pandemic, COVID, Jesus Christ, we need to get this over the line education, which is
Yeah.
very different. You got a whole bunch of people who don't want to do this, who don't know how to do this, who have never really tried to do this,
Mm.
all being told you must do this. And that's that's just true for everyone. That's not necessarily different for people who work in universities or schools or whatever. But it's a particular challenge because I actually think personally, and this is what my own experience was and what my experience of teaching or learning is that you learn most from doing things in a almost like a group therapy session,
Mm.
right? You get some content off some dude who goes blah blah blah, and then you sit down and go, I didn't understand any of that to you, and he goes, oh well, maybe I understand some of it, and then the dude gives you a deadline. It says you must produce a problem set with an answer, in 2 weeks or something.
Mm-hmm.
And what follows then is a kind of like enforced group therapy session under pressure where everybody curses the dude's name and goes, I hate that guy, cancel fuck him, and whatever. And that's all fine. But what happens is they teach each other
Mm.
how this how they embed their learning using the instrument of the assessment. Right?
Mm.
That's all the assessment is. It's a bridge to get you from I don't know that thing to I really know that thing. That's all any assessment is. And
Yeah.
the question like I often have is like that part of it, that group therapy part of it, that
Mm.
chat part of it, that okay, let's go for a drink part of it. That is actually where the learning happens.
Yeah.
And so a bit like Jenny's experience with her a bit like Jenny's experience with her
Class.
Zoom breaks. I was look breakout rooms.
Sure.
Um, yeah, a lot of it is like, well, that group therapy thing's gone
Mm.
because even if they were like four really good mates and they
Yeah.
all turned on their cameras and they were like singing and dancing and sparkles and whatever, right?
Yeah.
They only have 10 minutes to do it.
Yeah.
You know
Yeah.
what I mean? And then they go back and it's the isolation of
Mm.
and even if they get on like a 12-hour Zoom call, it's not
Mm.
the same. And I've
No.
been on some long ass Zoom calls, so I know they can be draining. I still haven't found that button to turn off the thing. I'll find it. Yeah,
Top right,
yeah.
three blue dots. If you click on
I can't
those,
see any blood. That's my problem. I can't see those bloody
it's
dots.
okay. Do you
Look,
know what?
whatever, whatever.
You're lying down. Mind yourself. I suppose.
I'm not sitting up to find it.
Don't. But hide self view, folks. I think I've mentioned it before. But seriously, it makes life a lot easier. Because we're not meant to be looking at ourselves. Or else we're all just gonna go back out into the world with little mirrors that on selfie sticks and put them behind people's heads and be talking to them and looking at ourselves in the mirror at the same time. Could be a
That's.
fallout from all of this.
I mean, I mean, yeah, yeah. What's the famous Caravaggio is Narcissus, right?
Mm.
So Narcissus is he's just there and he's staring at himself and he's going ooh ah. Narcissus would have been deadly on Instagram, I think.
Oh, completely,
You know, he
completely.
would have been great, but I don't know if he would have. Maybe he would never have actually posted. He'd always be kind of fiddling with the settings of the
Yeah.
thing. You know, he would never. He'd be sort of photoshopping the pores off himself.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm.
I just thought, and I think it's important. I don't want to be talking on Jenny's behalf. She was not giving out or moaning about anyone. She was just saying this mad thing happened in this
Yeah.
in my experience, you know, and uh, I think it's interesting. And I do. It gives me a bit of the heebie-jeebies as well, but where people are asked to put cameras on and they just don't. And as I said, they're completely valid reasons for that. But I think if you just don't put it on and there is no explanation, then yeah, I get it. It's hiding behind your desk, lifting your desk up and eating the chocolate underneath it. I totally get it. I'm into it. I met someone once who was teaching and they were gone like I bumped into them with someone and they were going for a walk and they said, "Yeah, I've just left my students like doing work and I'm gone on a walk, you know, but technically I'm still there." Like it's going both directions. It's
Yeah.
not just I don't want to be saying that it's one just the students. And yeah, it is lovely this idea of being able to kind of hide away yet technically be somewhere. But I suppose I'm curious of what is the fallout for this in human life when things do, I wouldn't say return to normal, but when things do, when we come out of this, is there going to be a bizarre etiquette even in human form? I don't know. I mean, that's why we talk stuff. I don't know if you have any opinions whether people will have veils or something.
I mean, I do think that we're going to have to re-educate ourselves as to how this is done. I think that's important. I think that we are going to, particularly for first years, right? So there are people now who are in their second semester of college who have never been to college,
Mm,
right? Or if they have been to college, if they're in on campus, um, they're mostly in their spare rooms,
mm,
right?
mm,
So college is like I think it's not well understood, but colleges are actually open. You know, for like if you want to move from I don't know Donegal to Limerick, you can get accommodation in Limerick. I don't know why you would do that personally. I would not. If my son wanted to do that, I would say no, don't do that, because you're depriving yourself of all structure and of all support structures.
mm,
Um, but anyway, people have chosen to do it. That's the choice. That's grand. The question is, for these students, what is life going to be like when hopefully September of this year we'll be able to have the students back on campus
mm,
if they're all vaccinated.
mm.
If we're all vaccinated, we may not be all vaccinated.
I know.
So does that mean does that mean and this is I mean I have no special information on this, but does it mean that we could be looking at a situation where it's January of 2022 before we're back on campus? I mean, there's certainly, it's not a non-zero probability that that's the case. If that's the case, we're going to have people who are halfway through their second year of college who haven't been to college. Like, and so in economics, you know, like what you learn is very important. I think economics is extremely important. But ultimately, a bad economist is a bad economist can have really, really, really serious consequences. But in 20 years' time, when that economist is a really senior person, right?
Mm,
A badly trained nurse or a badly trained doctor can mess somebody up right now, you know?
mm,
Um, like I think the mistakes economists make harm millions of people, millions. And those mistakes are they're typically when the economist is giving bad advice to a policymaker. That's typically how it happens.
Yeah.
Um, and so it's unlikely, therefore, that the short-term impact of bad teaching or bad learning or inappropriate teaching or inappropriate levels of learning are going to take place with economics training. But if you like, if you have to build a building, you know, if you
Yeah.
have to, there's a lot of, if you have to certify a set of financial accounts, if you have to do this stuff, you will definitely, definitely, like unless your learning is equal to or greater than or equal to what is happening in the old style,
Mm.
um, there's going to be a question mark over you, so somebody, let's imagine a world where somebody comes out with a BA in economics, but they've spent 4 years in this kind of pandemic world, and another person comes out, 4 years previously, no pandemic. Are they trained the same way?
Mm.
They've probably seen the same slides,
Yeah.
ish,
But
right?
it's, yeah.
Um, but how has their learning been impacted? It's a very useful thought process. I mean, it's not a question we can ever have an answer to, right?
Well,
But it is.
not
It,
anytime soon.
oh no, no, no! Indeed, you won't know it for another 2 or 3 years at
Well,
least. And
yeah.
please God, we never have to learn the answer, you
Well,
know.
this is it. I mean, the
But
thing
yeah,
is, well, I'm talking to educators who are teaching kind of things around maybe artistic practices where it might be around listening and communication, and they can't get people to put their cameras on and are singing, and people are cameras off, and if the camera is on, they're lying in their bed, and it's like you can't sing lying down, you have to be standing. And I suppose I'm just,
that's me fucked. So
yeah, you're fired from your singing class. um
fired
I
from singing.
I think it's like, I think in if we can be empathic and mindful of the positions people are in, of course, but I do think it is a question we need to look at, is if we don't need to actually actively engage, if it's an option, we withdraw and we go for disconnection,
Yeah,
and we go for no visible connection. Even one of the things Jenny was doing was around negotiating, and couldn't get anyone to talk to her. Do you know? And it's just, I suppose I'm just finding it really, I'm finding it concerning because of the way I'm built is very much about trying to garner connection with people. And
mm,
if
yeah,
if the power, if I'm in a room, I can maybe say to someone, like, let's do this exercise and let's maintain eye contact. But if
yeah.
that person decides to put a beekeeper's costume on and refuses to remove it, I like, I can never, you can never make anyone do anything. I mean, that's not good education anyway. But
No,
I'm curious as to what the fallout will be on a very subtle level for us as human beings.
well, I think that human beings desire connection.
Mm,
Like fundamentally, we all desire connection. Um, I'm something I'm writing about for the currency this week. It's all about what's your definition of normality. And I think I told you this before, but a friend of mine who's a public health doctor, I asked her like, what's your definition of normality? She said, when Coppers is open again, you know, Copperface Jackson in Dublin. She's from Dublin, and I said that's a really interesting thing because Copperface Jackson is a lot of things, but it's really all about connection of many different kinds, right? And so it's
yes.
it's 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 about meeting up with your friends and making new friends and all
Mm,
that kind of stuff. And
yeah.
so that idea is like fundamentally it's about being able to mix again, right? Being able to meet strangers again and being able to have the chats again.
Mm,
And so like I think normality looks like a resumption of the kind of connections that we had before,
mm,
right? That's like I don't define normality in terms of the shops being open or whatever, or the pubs being open. Like that's not it. It's like,
no.
can you and I decide to go for a pint?
Indoors.
Like indoors, that's a really, really, or can I just come over to your house for a cup of tea? Can you come over to
and
my house for a cup of tea?
and not be
You
conscious
know,
of accidentally
of
being too near each other or anything.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I've got a really good friend. He lives in the housing estate that I live in, and like love hanging out with him. Haven't seen him in months. I
Hmm.
see him like I kind of wave at him from the window, and he like waves at me. He's driving up, big sad
Yeah.
head stuff. And it's like it's the same thing, right? It's the same thing. It's a desire for connection.
Mm.
The students have it too. I think the connection might be the thing that drives the learning. Um, but as we're talking, it um it has dawned on me that I really know very little about what it is that drives learning.
Really?
Does that make any sense? Well, I don't know how students learn. I know how I learn,
Hmm.
but that's it's trivial and irrelevant. Like that's like saying I know I'm how to parent. I'm not an expert in
Sure.
parenting just because I have some kids. You know,
No.
um,
No.
and I definitely don't play a parenting expert on the internet. So it's like, you should raise your children with razor blades. That's not. Don't do that. But that whole thing about what is it? What is it? What is it to learn something?
Mm.
Is it to master a skill? Well, machine learning for economics, yeah, it is actually. It's about, can you take some data, make sense of it, make some pictures of it, make an inference, say if this part of the data goes up, then that part of the data will go down. Yeah, okay. That's learning is that process. You're figuring out how to do that.
Mm.
Can you intubate a child? Right, if a child's not breathing, can you use a specific piece of a specific tool to place a tube down the child's airway such that the child continues to breathe? Right, that's a very specific skill. I'm pretty sure you can't learn that on the internet. You know,
Nope.
what about learning to critique something?
Mm.
Uh, what about learning to have empathy with somebody? What about learning to crush them in negotiations?
Mm.
What about figuring out what's called the BATNA, the best alternative to negotiations, right?
Yeah.
Like what about all that? That's all human stuff, and
Yeah.
it's all based around the data that you definitely don't have if your camera's always off and if people can't see you.
Mm.
You know,
I
which is a weird place to be.
It's a weird place to be, and I'm conscious as usual of time. The other side of this is a completely different take that everything will go back, and obviously we'll all physically be together, and we'll all hark back to this marvelous time where you could just turn off your camera and not have to dress a certain way, or we can hark back to this magical time where you could literally lift the desk up and the teacher wouldn't see you, and it was grand. And we might look back with rose tinted glasses at this period of time.
When we
but,
didn't have a commute and when our emissions were 7% lower globally,
and we could just
and
walk in.
when you just walk in and where pants were optional
Pants were
for the first
optional.
for the first time ever.
All these
You
things,
know,
everything there is, with the good comes the bad. And we might look at another time.
indeed.
There's a whole idea, and I know, like, you are a parent, and the idea that children learn through play, and I do feel that
Yeah,
is still applicable in all areas, on variant levels. But we could talk about that another time. But in the meantime, Stephen, mind your back, you poor thing. Uh, get well soon.
yeah. I'll do my best. I'll do
And
my best. It'll take a couple of weeks to get right, but I'll be grand.
do, do.
Thank you very much.
Listen, I'll talk to you next week. Thanks, Stephen. Bye.